is how to duck out. That's just really hard for me to do. It's just not in my DNA to go somewhere and then duck out. And so I'm really grateful that you're here. And before we start, I'd like to invite everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll talk about that later. So I'm really excited to be here, and I see a few of our community leaders and our CHP and sheriff, who I forget names. So and from CHP.
Yes.
And
Anthony Dixon.
thank you very much for being here. It's so nice of you. And is there anyone here who serves on a CPAC or a board? I thought I saw Bruce from the library here. Oh, Bruce from our library director. Any other Park District Board? Oh yes, Greg Fowle who runs our Park District. Yes. Thank you for being here. And it's a special day today, 9/11. And but before we start, there's one other really special person here, and that is my great niece, Isabel. Stand up, Isabel. Sorry to make you do it. And her mom, Laura. And Isabel, you're here to do some school
community service.
Yeah, so thank you for coming, and thanks for choosing one of my meetings to do it in. And I can't believe I'm so old that I have a great niece, so there you go. So before we get started, I want to just let you know that tonight I'm going to be visiting with you a little bit about our budget that we just passed at the county, jails, homelessness. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Electric Greenway. Is there anyone here to talk about that? Oh, I thought there were people coming to talk about that, but I'll give you an update on that. And a little update on massage parlors in Orangevale. We had some activities that we were working on around that. But before we get started, I wanted to just take a moment and read something that I heard this morning in one of the 9/11 ceremonies that I had the privilege of being in, and it was such an inspiring and beautiful story, and if you don't mind, I'd like to share it with you. So this was part of a speech by a colonel who was at Cal Expo this morning, and in his speech he says, "I wish to commemorate the courageous heroes of 9/11 by remembering one of the most notable figures, Rick Rescorla. Rick was actually a British citizen, born in Cornwall, who served in both the British and American armies. In 1965, he was awarded a Silver Star for his bravery in the Battle of Orangevale in Vietnam. Fast forward to 1985, where Rick Rescorla was the Chief of Security for Dean Witter. In 1990, he predicted that the Twin Towers would be bombed at its base, and his recommendations for improving security were ignored. In 1993, after the bombing of World Trade Center at its base, Rick Rescorla gained a bit more respect, and when Dean Witter was acquired by Morgan Stanley in 1997, he became their chief security officer. Morgan Stanley eventually occupied 22 floors in the South Tower, and Rescorla's office was on the 44th floor. Rick realized that in the event of a disaster, the 2,700 employees of Morgan Stanley, the largest tenant group in the towers, could not rely on first responders. He believed their safety was completely his responsibility. Therefore, Rick conducted surprise fire drills in which he trained employees to meet in the hallway between stairwells and go down the stairs 2 by 2 to the 44th floor. Rick's militant approach to these drills ruffled feathers among some high-powered executives, but he nonetheless insisted that these rehearsals were necessary to train employees in the event of an actual emergency. He timed employees with his stopwatch, and when they moved too slowly, he lectured them, Army style, on their lack of compliance. At 8:46 a.m. on the morning of 9/11, American Airlines Flight 11 struck North Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. Rescorla heard the explosion and saw the tower burning from his office window on the South Tower, too. When the New York Port Authority announcement came over the PA system urging people to stay at their desks, Rescorla ignored the announcement, grabbed his bullhorn, walkie-talkie, and cell phone, and began systematically ordering Morgan Stanley employees to evacuate. He directed his people as he had trained them 2 by 2 down the stairwell, while singing Cornish songs from his youth with his booming voice to inspire and calm employees as the building lurched violently following the crash of United Airlines Flight 175 into Tower 2, 38 floors above them. At 9:03 a.m., even a group of 250 people visiting the offices for a stockbroker training class knew exactly what to do because of the discipline of Rescorla he had instilled in all the people in his care. After personally evacuating over 4,600 Morgan Stanley employees, one of his colleagues told him that it was time for him to leave. Rescorla replied, "As soon as I make sure everyone else is out." He was last seen on the 10th floor heading upward shortly before the South Tower collapsed at 9:59 a.m. The lesson of 9/11 is to be prepared for the unthinkable. We who love freedom will forever be the target of those who do not. Stay engaged in your relationships, look out for each other, leave no one behind. That was a beautiful message, and I thought, oh, this is far more important than any little thing I can say. I wanted to share it with you because it really impressed me this morning when I heard that. So, today we remember the loss, and we will never forget, but we also honor those who carry on, the first responders in our fire and police who every day keep our neighborhoods safe and watch out for us and run toward danger to make sure we're safe. And so I'm with that, I will begin my part of the presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so this morning I just will briefly, this morning. It's a long week this week. This evening I would like to share a little bit about our budget this year. I don't want to say the word bleak because bleak is kind of a sad word, but it was a difficult budget this year at the county. Even though we have a $4.5 billion budget at the county, and this year we had an increase in revenues of over $104 million, but we had an increase in expenditures of over $109 million. And so the challenges that we ran into were mostly large expenditures associated with lawsuits. One of them, all three of the large lawsuits were an ongoing issues that were going on over the last 20 years and kind of culminated all at once for the county. One of the big ones was the jail ADA lawsuit that the county settled with a consent decree, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the middle in just a little bit, but I wanted to just share some of the good things that happened in the budget. We did add some funding for the sheriff for $5.5 million for Sheriff and Correctional Health Services. We added some positions for psychiatric services in the jail and new positions that would address some of the inmate supervision. We also added funding for the Department of Child, Family, and Adult Care Services. The funding that we added addresses needs associated with mental health and drug and alcohol. We also approved some funding that will hopefully help us with within the foster care system. And one of the things that our big focus right now is with foster children, making sure that they end up with someone in their family. So if for some reason their parents get arrested or they die, they end up in the foster care system. The goal is to see if we can identify someone else in their family, like an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, that might be able to adopt them. And so making that happen can sometimes be a little bit challenging, because it's like sometimes it's a surprise, it's not what they expected, they have their own family, they're not sure if they can handle it, and so it's working through, with the help of social services to try to work through that process. And so that's an area that we're trying to improve because of the challenges we're having, not just with foster care and the changes to the system, but the fact that children are actually aging out of the system and with no place to go, and they're not really ready to go. And so finding a family member means that's someone that they're with, for life. It's not really someone that needs the income to take care of them. It's more of a permanent situation. So I wanted to just comment a little bit about the budget. I wasn't going to go deep into the numbers on the budget because Matt told me people don't want to hear that much detail. And if you want to hear more detail, talk to me and I'll try to figure it out. But what I wanted to basically tell you is that my priorities in my campaign and as a county supervisor have always kind of centered around public safety is my top priority. I believe that everything hinges on public safety. If your neighborhoods are not safe, people won't want to move there. If people don't move there, businesses won't want to be there. Community and economic development and everything, a thriving community, is all centered around is there public safety. So that's real important to me, and also one of the big concerns I have about our budget at the county is that we don't have enough reserves. When I first got elected in 2017, we had around 1.5% in reserves for our general fund. And at that time, I calculated that those reserves would take us about 8 days. If something catastrophic happened, that would be enough to last 8 days of our ongoing monthly expenses. And then we would have to start figuring out what programs or employees or what are we going to cut to make ends meet. At this time, the county does have an ordinance that requires them to put 10% of their increase every year into reserves. And so we do that every year. Unfortunately, this year, because of the challenges with some of the lawsuits that we're having and the jail, especially the jail situation, actually not especially, all of them, we had to try to figure out how we were going to balance the budget. And as you know, by law, we have to balance it by a certain date every year. It's in early October. And so what we did is we had all of our county top executives go back to their department and figure out how can we find efficiencies, what programs are not working, where can we save money. And they came back with a presentation of where they felt like they could cut, and then on top of that, on top of those cuts, we were able to identify $43 million worth of unfilled positions that we could cut. That meant we could, not without laying people off, we could cut that out of the budget. That helped a lot, but that was a one-time cut that we will not have next year because we've already done it. And we also did retire some of our reserves, although we did also add more to our reserves. And at the end of the day, we have just a little over 1.5% in reserves, and we're facing some pretty big expenses coming up. The jail lawsuit is probably what's big in the news and on the forefront of our thoughts right now. It's something that the county has been negotiating with the Prison Law Office and Disability Rights of California, who basically came to us and said, we will sue you. We're willing to have a conversation and settle this if you do what we think is compliant with the law that was passed in, like back in 1994, I believe. The county has tried, to improve our conditions in the jails, but as time went by, it's been difficult to figure out how we're going to afford that. Now we can't figure it out. We have to do it. And the county over the last 2 years has been negotiating, and we did agree to, I guess the consent decree is our settlement on what we feel like we can do and what they will accept. And if we hadn't have settled, they said it will come back and it will be a lot harder. We will make it a lot worse. So do this and try to work with it, or it will be worse and you will spend money on a lawsuit. The decree is going to fix 6 things. We agreed to improve medical care in our jails, mental health, out of cell time, ADA compliance issues, suicide prevention, and use of force policies. So one of the problems that we have about the ADA is that we have I already told you about this? Okay, you might have heard it, but hopefully those who have heard it before will not mind. The jail was built in 1977, and it's like a cement tower, and so making it ADA compliant means widening so a wheelchair can fit through doors. In some cases we can't do that without taking out a whole wall between 2 cells because there's not enough room. We even thought about how can we do roll-up doors. They've been working on this and studying it, and basically at the end of the day we're going to lose 30% of our capacity in one of our jails after the ADA to make it compliant with today's construction and ADA standards. And so how we're going to deal with that is we're going to add another, I guess you could call it a tower, but it's not really, it's only probably about 3 stories high, and that facility will manage the mental health, the medical. We're going to have more intense screening so that we can make sure that when people come in, those that are, really need to be separated out into a more serene environment and they need care, that we can make sure they're put in that location and not into the general population. And then there's other things that have to be done with both of our jails. We have 2 jails. I do want to mention that the people who did come to sue us also sued Santa Clara, Fresno, Riverside, multiple other counties and jurisdictions that had jails. They are the same people that sued the state prison systems, and that was the reason, over a decade ago we began to see all this policy that was changing and realigning public policy around
ADA compliance.
Well, it really began to relieve the prison system. So it was relieving the prison system and releasing people early, and then So AB 109 did that, and then Prop 47 and 57 basically redefined crimes that used to be felonies into misdemeanors. So now people can go into a Rite Aid and steal $950 and not be arrested. Or they can be arrested, but they won't keep them because it's a misdemeanor and no one even bothers. I've been there and I've seen it. I've been in a Rite Aid when someone walked out and they said, "You have to pay for that, ma'am," and she said, "No, I'm not going to pay for it." And we just watched her walk out with our mouths hanging open. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. So now we're in that situation where at the county we're facing the same thing that the state prison system faced, which is how are we going to afford this and how can we get less people in our jail? That's the conversation that's going to come next. And there's also a conversation around changing the bail system. I don't know if you've heard about bail reform. And when we change the bail system, the concern that I have around that, what we're talking about is it creates other jobs on the public side. So it'll mean judges and psychologists have to review and interview people to see if they're likely to be a danger to the community before they decide if they can be released. It'll also mean that once we release them, are they going to come back for their trial? And if they don't come back, who chases them? Is it the public money that chases them? Or because always in the past it's been the bail bondsmen that went out and hunted them down and brought them back, and it was a private business model that worked. Now we're switching that to the public side, so that's going to be another business run on the public side, which means taxpayers are going to be, at the end of the day, paying for that. That's my concern about it. I do believe that we're on the right track to try to think of ways to give, like a knucklehead kid who was on drugs and did something wrong, and there's programs now where if they go through a program and they go through the counseling and the drug rehab or whatever, they can bypass having a felony on their record and actually, if they stick with the program, have a second chance. And basically that is a second chance, because once you have a felony on your record, it does follow you wherever you go for the rest of your life. So anyway, what I basically will tell you is that the county has been working hard to try to fix make some impact on the jails. In 1917-18, we added a new 20-bed mental health intensive outpatient pod in one of our jails. In 18-19, we added additional staffing in our jail to free up deputies for more out-of-cell time. And in 1920, we are funding 2 additional 20-bed intensive outpatient units and enhancements for our inmates. So in the past 2 or 3 years, we've spent anywhere from 10 to 20 million on our jails, and we've been trying to make progress, but at the end of the day, we anticipate the jail capital improvements, the ADA improvements, are going to cost around 100 million, and the extra added personnel to meet the requirements of the medical and mental health and out of cell, and everything that will go along with proper care and better appropriate treatment in our jail system will be around, we figure, around 50 million added a year, which means there's a big investment that we're going to make into our jails. I kind of cry a little bit because we have seniors who are struggling that we can't seem. I mean, we have seniors that we're having an increase in senior homelessness right now. But I'm not saying, I do believe we should do we should make sure people are safe in our jail, and it shouldn't be this thing where they go to jail and they have to fear for their life. So I get that. I wanted to talk just briefly about roads and tell you there's not enough money for roads. You already know that. And there's conversations around another tax initiative of some kind for 2020, so you'll probably be seeing that. And at my SACOG board, Sacramento Area Council of Governments, we're talking about different things that can be done to try to figure out how are we going to pay for the roads. What is it? Toll roads, dedicated lanes, more taxes. The challenge that I think I have with all of it comes down to, when I was in the private sector as a business owner, it was, if I didn't have enough money coming in, I had to go out and sell more to get more coming in, or I had to cut my expenses. And so I think on the public side, we're always talking about we don't have enough revenues. But I think the real problem we have on the public side is we're not spending it well. We're not spending it in a way that's, getting to the heart of the problems. So with that, I'll just mention the high-speed rail and all these big projects that we seem to be able to get money for, but we can never get enough money to maintain our roads, which isn't real sexy. It doesn't fix the housing job imbalance in San Francisco and LA, but it would, the money that's going into that high-speed rail could fix all the roads in California and help a lot with congestion. So, but that's just me, and I'm only one person. I wanted to share a little bit about something that's coming, an opinion piece that's coming out in the Sacramento Bee, probably tomorrow, I hope. And it's relating to the Ninth Circuit Court decision around Martin versus Boise. Does everyone know what that is? Is there anyone that does not? Okay. So basically in September 2018, there was a case that went to the Ninth Circuit Court whereby there were some homeless advocates and attorneys that sued the city of Boise because they said their anti-camping ordinance was cruel and unusual treatment. And I guess the case, they did not win, and then they took it to the Ninth Circuit Court, and the Ninth Circuit Court ruled that the city's ordinance that regulates camping and disorderly conduct violates the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. So I wanted to, I do have an opinion, the county did take action on that. Boise in June of 2019 decided they were going to appeal to the Supreme Court. And the Sacramento County in August of 2019 voted that we would join a coalition of other counties to stand with Boise and send an amicus brief and share our concerns around that decision. And I think the mayor of Boise said it really well. He said, we're bringing this case forward because we must have tools to respond to the public health and safety dilemmas created by encampments. And so at the end of the day, the homeless situation, we've talked a lot about it over the last several years. And people, a lot of people have a lot of compassion. I do. I have a family member that was homeless. And it's horrible. It impacts the whole family because you don't know if they're okay out there. And the problem with the homeless situation is that in our cities, especially in high population areas where there's a lot of cement and asphalt, when you have food and garbage and human waste, the land cannot absorb it without having public health issues. Maybe you could, if they were all spread out all over in the country, maybe it could work, but it doesn't work that way in a highly populated area. The other thing that is concerning to me is that the very most vulnerable people out there that are on heroin or meth, you know, and they take the drug and they end up in one of these dangerous encampments, they are more vulnerable than ever, and they're in a situation where they can be hurt or violated. And so just taking away our tools, and I like to think of, when I think of policy and law enforcement, the policy that we set gives law enforcement the tools they need to manage our communities and keep them safe. And so when you take away that anti-camping ordinance and they can't ask someone to leave unless they provide shelter, and we don't have enough beds for all of them, and some of them don't want shelter. That's the real big problem, is getting them into shelter. Most of them come in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out. And I know from personal experience, I can tell you, and there's people in this room that know that's true. So they can't always make it the first time, and so it takes a lot of wraparound services and love and persistence and trust building, and it takes time in some cases. You can't just say, here, let's put you over here and things will be better. They don't always want to go. So at the end of the day, taking our tool that we use to keep our parks free of needles that our kids play in, or criminals, or human feces, or whatever. I'm sorry to say that, but you know, it is a public health and it is a public safety issue, and without the tools, our public safety personnel cannot manage it, and will be just like Seattle is Dying. I don't know, has anyone seen Seattle is Dying? Mm-hmm. I watched it, took 3 pages of notes. And basically up there, the police are just standing there watching people because they don't have any tools. They can't do anything. So I'm proud that we're standing with Boise, and we'll see where that goes. But without the tools, we can't protect the most vulnerable who are homeless. That's the real rub. It's not just about our community members who we should think about too. This isn't just about homeless people. Public is, when you say public places, that means public places for everyone. And when one person makes it so all people can't go there, then it begins to infringe on someone's rights as a citizen, I think. So I think we need to start fighting for the community too, and for the most vulnerable. I do want to share with you that there was a winter shelter that the Sacramento County ran. I don't know if anyone was acquainted with it, but there's the Homeless Assistance Resource Teams, which I think there's 7 or 9 of them now, spread out in all the communities. But the county was running one of those homeless winter shelters, and this year we have voted just the other day to discontinue that winter shelter model, and mostly because the faith community that was helping to manage it was basically coming to the county and saying, we're getting tired. I mean, when they come, and I know because I've worked in the winter shelters too, you know, everybody brings food, we all go in shifts. Some people stay all night. We take shifts, we share shifts at my church. And basically, it was not sustainable because people were wearing out. And so what the county decided to do was take a building that's county-owned down by the River District in Sacramento, which is where most of the people were coming from. They were busing them from downtown Sacramento to all the outlying faith areas who were willing to help, which was really great, but it wasn't going to last. Now we're going to build a shelter down there where it'll be 24/7 shelter. It will help them clean up the streets a little bit during the day. It'll make sure people have a shelter day and night, and hopefully wrap services around them and help them transition out of homelessness into, you know, job training out of drug addiction. We also added money for drug and alcohol treatment. So we're on a good path, hopefully, and that's going to work well. It's going to end up being around 415 single beds and 20 family units in the River District downtown. And we're working in collaboration with Sac City on that, and that's going very well. I wanted to give you an update on my little initiative. I don't know if I shared it with you. It was called the Pride Ascent, and it was something that I asked the board to do last year. And it was a homeless work training program, and basically Pride Industries in Roseville was contracted with, we contracted with them to administer the program, whereby they would go out and recruit 10 groups of, four groups of 10 individuals who would be brought into a shelter, taken to a certification course for a few hours in the day, then they work for another few hours, taken back to their shelter, and they just have to come every day and go through the certification. They get a certificate training in the area of construction trades, and then they get placed into an internship, apprenticeship program. If they do well in that, they'll be hired, and they could, in theory, end up with a job, and now we can match them with a housing voucher because they have revenues. And it was just a pathway out for some of those people who don't have Social Security or disability. Like 24% of our homeless are veterans, and so a lot of times they can be connected to income, or they are connected, no one just knows where to send it because they're homeless. Same with Social Security. I've seen some people come out of homelessness that we've helped through our winter shelter at my little church, that the one woman that we helped ended up having $60,000 at Social Security that they owed her, but they didn't know how to get it to her. So we got her in an apartment, and she ended up having a gallstone surgery because she was really sick, and after she healed, she's now helping homeless people, and she's living happily ever after. So there are people that just need a leg up. So anyway, on the Pride program, I thought it would just be, a breeze, but nothing's breeze. And so there have been some challenges. It's hard to find people that are clean and sober. The first thing we found out was all of them were on marijuana. 9 out of 10 of the recruits were on marijuana. So what Pride did was they waived their marijuana rule. They just said, let's not worry about the marijuana. Let's just forget it. I mean, they're yes.
So did they smoke or do that while they were getting educated or working?
No, I just think they have to go through the drug test to get in the program. That was part of the program. You can't drink and use and all that, but they tested positive on both cases. So what they basically did was they kind of ended up relaxing the marijuana thing and excusing it, and there were absentees, a lot of absenteeism. I think out of the 10 people, there ended up being like 6 people who were consistently sticking through it, and 2 of them who were the women. Sorry guys, but I have to say this, there were 2 women that seemed to do better. That was just that one group though. But I'm just saying, the challenge they were having was recruiting people that were ready for that kind of commitment, I think. I think for some people that are coming out of homelessness, they're used to living a pretty free, relaxed lifestyle, and to show up all day and study and then work for hours is like, it's got to be brutal, I mean, I can imagine they wouldn't want my life, I'm sure. So anyway, what we did, Matt and I met with them, and we talked about some possible, possibly we can recruit more people, and then we'll find more people, numbers, and more people that would fit. And we also talked about maybe the construction trade is a little bit intimidating, and maybe we could do cooking and janitorial and some other trades that are not quite so intense, like learning how to hammer and saw and, you know. So I think we're kind of thinking along those lines, although we did need more construction workers. That was part of the beauty of it. I wanted to share, does anyone have questions about the electric greenway that Citrus Heights is doing? I won't go into it if you
Do you know
don't.
what it is?
No one? Okay. Well, there's a trail, there's a bike trail that Citrus Heights is building. The county has one tiny little part of it that crosses into Orangevale, but most of it is in Citrus Heights. And so it's going to be wonderful. It's going to connect with some other bike trails. Ultimately, someday, there's going to be some beautiful bike systems, but getting them put in is not easy because sometimes, especially when homes are already established and people are worried about cutting trees down, and so they're working their way through that process. They have passed the EIR on it, and at some point they will, my understanding is the county might deed some property over to the Orangevale Park District. Is that right, Greg? Something like that?
Yeah, it's going to go through, for Orangevale, it's going to go through Sundance Park from Fair Oaks, and then for the 7-Eleven is on Woodmore Oaks, it's going to go through there and then to String Avenue. And that's our portion for Orangevale. Then it goes into Sunrise Recreational Park District and Citrus Heights beyond that. And before that, it's all the way to Sunrise Marketplace, which is going to be a nice...
It's going to be a real nice amenity. And I just talked to the planning and in Citrus Heights, and he told me that it will go to the engineering in December or January, and throughout the next year they'll be making all the engineering plans and determining where the path is going to go and what trees get cut and where they'll mitigate and put other trees to make up for what they cut. And so they will be having a public process, and they will be reaching out to everyone on that path as they work through that. Yes?
And for either one of you, is there also a plan to keep this cleared up so it's not going to become another campground for the homeless?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll actually be better than it is now because there will be access, and it'll be a nice trail that is certainly used during the daytime. I think you'll see people using it. So
I think they're making it wide enough too so that public safety personnel and fire personnel can access through the trail. So it's not just a little walking trail. I mean, public safety can go through there, and yes, in the back and then up here.
Some of the problem I've seen in Roseville with the bike trail is that it does become a place where homeless can go for things. Yeah, like under, it goes, one in Roseville, it goes underneath the bridge, and back it's Leadville right there. And I used to walk that trail when I was with my kids and stuff, and that just kind of makes it like, oh, okay, like who am I going to meet when I come on this trail? You know, it's a little, so I'm hoping that, you know, we're taking that into consideration while building that is, are we making places that look like a great place for a tent, or, you know.
Yeah, that is really design. Design is really important, and I can tell you, having been on the city council and former mayor of Citrus Heights, that Citrus Heights will be working closely with the police department, and they have a whole protocol around how to make landscape safer. Lighting, they'll be working on lighting and landscaping, and actually bridges tend to have homeless people under them, and we have in the past in Citrus Heights made decisions not to have underpasses because of that very reason. So design, that's why that engineering process is going to be important, and community input is going to be really important because it'll kind of put on the, you guys bring things, you don't realize it, but we can't think of everything. And so the more heads we wrap around things, the better outcome we have. So that's why that public, you know, getting involved and sending your notes in is important. Even if you just send it to Greg, he'll relay it, I'm sure. Well, there was a woman up here, and then you in the back, and then you. Yes.
I know in our neighborhood watch meeting, it came up, we were concerned about who was going to patrol that, or if that was going to have a patrol, especially at night. And I think the last I heard was they would have the patrol go like once or twice every 24 hours, which really isn't going to do a lot. And the other would be lighting.
Yeah, I'm not sure what their plan is around that patrol. Do you know anything about that, Greg?
Well, I know the city of Citrus Heights is planning to have a patrol for the trail. We have our own patrol that we hire. They're not here all the time, honestly. They're here a few times a week, but they're more. We use them more on spot kind of events and things. But they are at our call if there's a problem or issue. And so I know that there's significant efforts to plan to patrol the entire trail, and I'm sure that there will be phone numbers to call when issues arise.
We also have a sheriff hot team, and we have a North Pop office here in Orangevale. So if it's an area that's in Orangevale proper, that would fall under, I think, the jurisdiction of our sheriff. I'm assuming it's the sheriff. And so there are also resources relating to the sheriff hot team, and they're wonderful. I mean, if you see an encampment somewhere in the unincorporated county and you call the sheriff hot team, they'll go out and begin to, well, they have a phone app, and they ask them a 15-point question. Do they have a criminal background? Are they a veteran? Then they have them in the GPS, and then the next time they run into that same person, they can see where they moved to. They know where they're beginning to be able to see how things are moving. If there's an area of high concentration of homeless, they're able to send, services around that highly concentrated area, which kind of helps disseminate that situation. So we're having a lot of success with the sheriff hot team, and even in spite of the cutbacks this year, and the sheriff did have to cut back a little bit on the hot, we got some additional funding and added some additional hot. So we got them back. So yes, so those are some of the resources, and I think this gentleman back here had a question.
This pathway that exists, it goes across this, it starts at Fair Oaks, across the street from the park where those tennis courts are, and wraps through to the neighborhood that you described over Woodmore Oaks, off of Woodmore Oaks. I mean, the path is there already. There are bridges already, for instance. It's just kind of a dirt path.
It's a great path. A great one. I love it.
And what's your question or point?
All that they're really going to do is just turn it into a paved path? Is that the...
I think
And light it?
I think the dream ultimately in the plan, in the overall bicycle big plan over time, is the hope that we can have a bicycle path that connects to the American River Parkway. And there is a regional plan that has a 60-mile bike path that is the American River Parkway, Dry Creek Parkway. It goes into Placer County a little bit and comes back into Citrus Heights or Orangevale. Greg, am I saying it right? Mm-hmm. And back to American River Parkway, right?
Yeah.
So that's the dream, right?
Yeah, and there's fingers that kind of come into the community a little bit, and so that it's hopefully all going to be connected. And over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, there's been slowly little sections that have been filling in to the point where I think it's getting some momentum now, and which is really cool. And what you were saying is there are some decomposed granite pathways that already exist, and some of them are just dirt, but there are areas like from the Sunrise Marketplace that kind of goes through that Smud Yard and through Temple Park that would be totally new pathways. And then, like you said, that they would be converting some of the decomposed granite ones and the dirt ones to paved trails. But it'll go all the way through Seabar C to Wachtel with this grant, which is, I think, a real nice addition.
Someone else had it. Was it you?
Oh,
No,
no,
it was, I'm sorry, it was him back there. No? Okay, he declined.
So I guess my question is, we've got that decomposed granite section, the one that he was mentioning. It's 6 feet wide, probably at its widest. Is the plan to go considerably larger than that? It sounds like vehicles, security vehicles, things like that would be expected on it, or?
It's a class,
It's one trail, it's a
He knows
10-foot
more about
wide
it.
pathway with 2-foot wide shoulders. And so I'm sure that there will be places along the trail where that narrows for logistical reasons, but generally that's the trail that we're trying to do. It's much like the American River Bikeway Trail. You want that kind of,
Across the street, like it goes through the park over there. You can go through the catch-through neighborhoods on the other side of Fair Oaks, where the tennis courts are and pathway
yeah,
towards.
Temple Park, yeah, uh-huh.
okay, so, are we good? Yep. We answered,
We gotta be.
or did we answer it?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of trees tagged in that area, so I was just wondering if the
Yeah.
idea was to go considerably wider, and my understanding is that oak trees are fairly protected, and I just was seeing kind of where that plays a role, you know, if those are going to be threatened with this pathway.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
I think that one of the things that, once we get down to the finite design, we will really find out exactly how many trees may be impacted. And we're hoping that it's not going to be a really large number. The trail is certainly going to have to swerve a little bit here and there, because we're not going to cut down large oaks. That is not the plan at all. So the idea is to preserve it absolutely as many as possible, and then once we get that finite design, we're going to have public meetings, and I really encourage you to continue to be part of that process. And we will actually have days where we go out to the site and actually walk it to take a look for the public too. So please keep engaged and do that. We really appreciate your input.
I think there was some concern around the trees because the EIR had identified a large, I guess, a large number of trees that would be eliminated. My understanding is that with the environmental review, we're looking at the worst case scenario. So what they have in that EIR isn't necessarily what's going to happen. What's going to happen next is that the engineers will begin drawing and planning, and that's when they'll work through all the community concerns and decide exactly where the path is going to go, which trees get cut down, and he said it won't be that many trees cut down. We'll save as many as we can, obviously, and the ones that we do cut down will be mitigated, and others will be planted in the same area. So it's going to look different as it unfolds. It's just, with the EIR, it costs so much to do those environmental reviews. You want it to be a worst case scenario so you don't have to go back and redo it. Okay, so are there any other questions that anyone has? Yes.
My name is Brian. Kind of tied in with this is my ongoing concern about the condition and usage of the American River Parkway, which ties in with the homeless and the levee issues. I know back in January they did the count, and I'm hoping that the numbers have been a little correlated by that. Do we have any update on the numbers, and not only for the county but for our zip code?
Yeah, we do have, the homeless count was completed. You know, every year we do this homeless count, and there were 5,720 homeless people, which was significantly more than 2 years ago. I think 2 years ago it was 3,600, and 2 years before that it was 2,600. So the homeless numbers are going up, and what we know is that during that count, as much as we try our best to reach everyone, we don't always reach everyone. So basically, the difference between this year and last year was that this year there were 900 people who volunteered to do the count. I went this year for the first time, got to talk to a homeless person under a bridge. It was real interesting. And he was a really nice person. And so there were 900 people over 2 nights. In the last 2 counts, there were a couple hundred people counting. So that kind of gives you an idea that maybe we reached more people because there were more people, but through their count and their studies, they estimated that our increase in homelessness was by 19% up over 2017 compared to LA, which had a 12 or 13% increase. But I'd still rather be here. There were increased families in cars. An estimated of 195 families per night are staying in their car in Sacramento. More older, over 55, first-time homeless folks. So the senior population is beginning to really feel the stress of all the expenses. They just keep going up everywhere you turn. A quarter of the total count had experienced foster care or adverse childhood events. 22% verbalized they have mental health challenges. I do want to say 50% said they drink or use. 70% unsheltered, which is fairly consistent with California cities. So that was some of the notes that I took. We estimate there's probably 10 or 11,000 homeless in Sacramento County. 36 people spent 1 night homeless. And the takeaway on the whole homeless count thing was that the biggest concentration is in Sacramento City. Senior homelessness is increasing. There's a large percentage, 50%, who drink or use drugs. There's also a large percentage, 22%, who had adverse childhood experiences. State money is asking us now for a regional plan, and we're trying to be more collaborative and regional in our plans. The challenge we're having with that is that maybe, the city of Folsom may not have the same appetite for financial risk as maybe the city of Sacramento. Different cities have different problems. Folsom has 60 homeless people. Sacramento has probably thousands. I mean, it's when you're bringing those together and trying to figure out a plan together, how does that work? So that's the challenge that we run into, but the county is the last resort for indigent, and we're working really hard to try to put more money to work. This year we're going to be spending a lot more Mental Health Services Act money. We identified over $100 million in our budget, which when I got elected in 2017, the staff said, we have a plan. We are making sure there's enough money to make sure when we start these programs, we can continue them over time and we have the money. And it was kind of a conservative approach because they really wanted to set up programs. It takes time to get money working, that we weren't going to run out of money. Now our new director says there's money that we can get from the state but we need to figure out how to put it to work faster. And his idea is to see if we can reach out to the small nonprofits that want to make a difference in the communities and give away these grants for 1 or 2 year one-time monies to get them activating programs and working on it. My concern around that, I think that's a great idea, but I hope they are going to also have a plan for their nonprofit to continually be fundraising as they're building their business model so that they can build on what they're doing and they're not just expecting that we're going to always have that money. That's what I worry about. The other thing I worry about is our drug problem. That drug, meth, it causes psychosis. It causes you to hear voices. And it is that the mental health, we have a huge mental health drug problem, and it's kind of all together. Did you have something, Gail?
Yeah, I was just curious. I don't hear about it as much as we used to a few years back with Sacramento Steps Forward. I know there was, a cooperative agreement with HOT to kind of potentially use some of their advocates or volunteers or whatever they call the folks going on outreach. But I haven't heard much lately. I mean, are they strictly focused in downtown Sacramento or are they still countywide?
They're still countywide. They work really closely with the HEART groups. They are very intertwined with homeless assistance resource teams. They provide the county pays for navigators, and they provide assistance in connecting people to services. So they are out there, and they're still a very big part of everything that's going on.
And are they a 501c or?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, because
But they're one of the big, like our Peter Bielenson, our director over the mental health care services or whatever, he said, there's a few big companies that always get the contracts. We want to reach out to some of the smaller ones that are qualified. We want to get more people, more activation of nonprofits. We want to get more money out there working faster. So there will be an RFP going out by the end of this year, probably in the next couple months, asking companies to apply for grants.
okay.
Any other, yes?
Good evening.
You and then you.
And then that's the end of the question.
Okay.
Nine one
I
one.
just want to know the status, you were talking about lawsuits earlier. What's the status on the lawsuit for the schoolhouse miners, the 100 million?
The county had to post a bond for $53 million. We're waiting for the court to decide our appeal, whether or not they'll adjust the, amount of that lawsuit or how that's going to come down. This is just me, I'm not going to say we. We could potentially have another $100 million, $109 million, including legal. So it's going to be a potentially expensive. Hopefully, if we post that bond, and then we can pay the other over time, just like we're paying UC Davis $95 million over time. And then we're going to have to figure out how to pay for the jails. So we have some interesting years coming, and your library is still coming. I think in October, they say that they're just working through with the owner of the building that who is doing all the upgrades, and the library authority made some wonderful suggestions on what those would be that would fit this community the best. They did some studies, and they're doing a really good job, so it's going to be worth the wait. But it is going to be twice as big as it was, the library. Did you have something?
The last question, sir.
Okay, sorry. Yes.
With the great effort you guys are making for the homeless and all this money going for mental health, and this looming recession that's going to be coming about, when crystal ball or anything, you guys got a plan that's going to stay funded, or is that just going to crash?
Well,
We're putting these efforts into place, but do we have a long-term plan?
Yeah, my long-term plan would have kicked in maybe decades ago, and we would have, been working really hard to make sure we had reserves. And I think there, at the end of the day, in a public budget, how it's different than a private budget is that in a private budget, you're trying to figure out how to make money. In a public budget, you're trying to figure out how to spend money well. At the end of the day, as we run into difficult times, then we have to look at the programs and the services that we're offering and determine where can we find efficiencies and what programs are not working as well and what can we cut, what do we have to have. The very first thing that I think we have to focus on is public safety.
Correct.
We should always make sure our public safety are funded. And after that, it seems like a lot of times, arts and stuff like that gets cut, but I think that's important too. But, at the end of the day, we will have to, there will be some hard decisions. We might have to cut back our workforce. We have 12,500 employees, and we need them to do all the stuff that the state keeps legislating us to do. But government, as it gets bigger, costs the taxpayers more. I also wanted to, I hope I answered, I didn't really answer, but
That's all right, that's all right. I know where you're going with
I
it.
don't know how to answer it. I'm only one person. I wanted to make sure that you're all aware that you have a Orangevale honorary mayor race going on right now. And there's 2 people running for the mayor of Orangevale, and you could be one of those people next year. But this year, what? Yeah, next year. Are you from Orangevale? Awesome. Sorry, I announced it to everyone. I'm the worst.
Yay!
But, okay, so Julie King and Jeff Jeff Che are running for mayor, and I love both of them, so I'm hosting a coffee with a cop, and Sheriff Jones is going to be there, and our CHP are going to be there, and our North Pop, and code enforcement, and so come on out. All the Bad Fish Coffee has been kind enough to let us host it there. And they are going to let the proceeds go to divided equally between the 2 candidates. So come on out and support these 2 candidates. How you win the honorary mayor race is you raise the most money. So
For charity.
for their favorite charity, which Jeff. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so Jeff is off Operation Good to Go and Make-A-Wish, and Julie is Fair Oaks Orangevale Food Bank and Orangevale Chamber of Commerce. So I'm going to donate to both of them, and they're going to divide it between their 2 charities, and that's how I'm going to do it. I hope you'll do the same.
When is the function?
And there's a flyer up here for this, and there were some other, well, it's on October 1st at 9 to 11 a.m. And it should be a lot of fun. Come on out, have a cup of coffee or tea, and meet your sheriff and all your fine law enforcement. And is there another announcement? Was there another flyer? Okay. So with that, I want to thank everyone for coming. There's a, if you are not on my newsletter list, there's a sign up going around. If you're already on it, don't worry about signing up, but if you're not and you want to receive my newsletter, it comes out once a month, and it's pretty easy read, and it explains, you know, like if I vote on something, why I vote no, and it's my way to report back to you and connect with you. Yes?
Are you done taking questions?
Yeah, I will be here after as long as you need me, so
Can I ask a question?
I might get in trouble. What if my chief of staff gets me in trouble?
After.
Okay, one more and that's it. Okay, then I'll be here after. I'm going to say, out of respect for everyone's time, let's conclude the meeting, and then I'll be here as long as you need me to. Come on up and we'll talk.
Nice.